Well, we are down to the final 4 weeks of the 2019 UFL season. My god, this season's gone by pretty quickly, although I've been simulating this since May and all. Should probably be finishing this soon. But hey, we finally got down to the final 4 weeks, and this season has been incredible, although the parity has been not so good this year, unfortunately. So let's take a look at the standings. So here's the stands right now with just 4 weeks remain. As we see in the Eastern Midwest, Minnesota leads at 9-3, then Indiana 8-3-1, St. Louis at 4-8, and then Detroit at 3-9. In the Eastern Gulf, it's the Memphis Warhawks leading at 8-3-1, then Houston at 5-6-1, Miami, the defending champs, eliminated from the playoffs at 3-9, and Tampa Bay at 2-9-1. Then the Eastern Atlantic, it's the Pittsburgh Titans, surprisingly still, leading the way at 11-1, followed by Washington at 8-4, Baltimore at 7-4-1, and Buffalo at 2-9-1. And then in the Eastern Pacific, we got Seattle leading at 8-2-2, then Oakland at 6-4-2, Anaheim at 4-8, and then Utah at 2-10. Then we go over to the Western Midwest, which it's Canton leading at 8-3-1, Kansas at 7-4-1, Green Bay at 5-7, and Cincinnati, the worst team in the league right now, at 1-11. And then we go to the Western Gulf, the Columbia Marines, the only team in the playoffs, believe it or not, still the only team in the playoffs, and that's only because their division sucks, at 10-2, and then New Orleans at 4-8, Jackson 4-8, and then Atlanta at 3-9. And then we go to the Western Atlantic, which is incredible. Philadelphia leading the way at 11-1, followed by New York at 10-2, then Boston at 7-5, and then finally Montreal at 2-11. And then we wrap up with the Western Pacific with Lubbock leading at 10-2, Los Angeles at 9-3, Phoenix at 2-8-2, and then Denver at 2-10. You know, it's hard to believe that we have two teams that are 11-1, and then we got, like 4 or 5 teams with at least 10 wins already or something like that, and only one of them is in the playoffs, and that's only because they're in a terrible division. The two 11-1 teams are still not in the playoffs, and they could actually miss the playoffs if everything went negative in their regard. That is incredible. We have a lot of terrible teams this year. We have a lot of very good teams, but of course those very good teams are like so close to each other that it makes it very difficult for them to clinch a playoff spot. But of course, as I mentioned in the last video covering Week 12, there are a lot of playoff elimination scenarios, as we'll start off in the Eastern Conference with St. Louis. If they lose and Washington wins, I mean to say, they are eliminated. Then you got the Anaheim Rockies. If they lose or Washington wins, they are eliminated. And then, of course, you got the Houston Bullets. If they lose and Memphis wins, they are eliminated. And that will give Memphis the division title for the first time ever in their first playoff appearance. And then, of course, we go over to the Western Conference. Of course, Green Bay, if they lose or Los Angeles wins, they're eliminated. So now we get to the playoff clinching scenarios. Of course, there's a few. Like I already said, Memphis, if they win and Houston loses, they will clinch a playoff spot and win the division for the first time ever in their 3-year existence. Pittsburgh, the best team in the Eastern Conference, if they win or both Baltimore and Washington lose, they will clinch the division and their first playoff appearance ever. And then we have to go over to the Western Conference, which Philadelphia, if they beat Boston, they are in the playoffs. And New York, if they win and Kansas lose, they are in the playoffs for the first time ever. So yeah, there are a lot of teams that are still trying to get into the playoffs for the first time ever. And then, of course, there's Lubbock as well. If they win and Boston and Kansas all lose, they will get in for the second time ever. So yeah, all these playoff teams, especially in the Western Conference, are going to be scary. And every one of the teams that are in the playoff race right now in the Western Conference have a legitimate shot to win the championship. Eastern Conference, not so much. So if the season ended today in the Eastern Conference, it would be Pittsburgh with the number 1 seed, Seattle with the 2nd seed, they would have the byes, then Minnesota with the 3rd seed, Memphis with the 4th seed, Indiana with the 5th seed, and Washington last with that 6th seed. And the Western Conference, it'd be Philadelphia with the number 1 seed, Lubbock with the number 2 seed, Columbia with number 3, Canton at number 4, then New York at number 5, and then Los Angeles with the 6th seed. So what's my predictions for the playoffs then? Well, in the wild card, of course, it would start off with Washington at Minnesota. I think Minnesota would get that. And then Indiana visiting Memphis. Indiana just beat Memphis this most recent week, but I'm not fully convinced on when they visit them. especially since Memphis overall is a much better team. So I think Memphis would get that. And then in the Western Conference, New York would have to visit Canton. And upset, I think I might have to pick New York for this one, as they've been playing on a roll these last 4 weeks after losing those 2 games after going off 6-2, and Canton is struggling. And then Los Angeles visiting Columbia. Don't think it's going to be close. Columbia would easily get that. And then in the divisional round, it would be the Memphis at Pittsburgh. I think Pittsburgh would get that. I don't fully trust Memphis yet. And then Minnesota visiting Seattle. I think in upset, I think Minnesota actually can get that. And then, of course, in the Western Conference, New York would visit Philadelphia, and I think Philadelphia would get that easily. And then, of course, Columbia would visit Lubbock, and Columbia is on such a roll, I think they will pull off the upset and beat Lubbock on the road as they still look to try and get their first playoff win. And then, of course, the conference championships. First up would be Minnesota at Pittsburgh. As we just saw, Pittsburgh beat Minnesota last time out, and I think they can do it again and make the championship for the first time ever. And then there will be Columbia at Philadelphia, and believe it or not, I think Columbia actually could pull it off. And if you look at their stats, they have a better offense and defense right now than Philadelphia, even though their record's not as good. So I think they can get in with that. And then with that, the 2019 title game would be Columbia at Pittsburgh. And between these two teams that have never won a title, I think Columbia is going to get it because they're overall much better than Pittsburgh. But hey, we have to wait and see. Anything could change. After all, we still have 4 weeks left to go. Anything could change then. So I hope you enjoyed watching the final quarter report for the 2019 UFL season. When next time you hear me talking, I'll be talking about the playoff schedule and crap when that time comes. So see you guys then.